Good. Test, test. Yeah, there's little mounts there, so you're good.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's good to see all of you here today. Thank you. Thanks for coming. On page 23 for today, we'll be using those, or you can use them as you so choose as we go through class today. Thank you for already putting all of your electronics away. That's much appreciated. And so we'll take a moment to come into presence. Your question this week, what is water? What is water? I've been really enjoying reading the answers, your responses. Answer makes it feel like there's a right or a wrong. That's not what I'm implying. It's more about the way that you choose to respond to the question, and then the way that you're paying attention to and responding to your lab mates is really beautiful. And so to take that a moment farther, thinking about water, one way that I've come to see water, and so this is how, at this point in my life, in my time, how I would answer this question, what is water? For me, water is a teacher. So as we think about all the different things that water can be, when I have this water in the jar and I shake it up, it can get really riled up. And then when I hold it still and steady, it comes to stillness pretty quickly. So how can that be a teacher for me, right? A lot of you are writing about how much of our bodies are composed of water. We're going to touch on that in class today. But if I have all of that water inside of me and I get amped up, riled up for some reason emotionally, then understanding that I too have the capacity to settle if I come to stillness. And often that means coming to awareness of my breathing as a tool. So take a moment with your feet on the floor. Arrival practice today of being like water, coming to find a stillness within ourselves, using the power of breath, taking those 3 good deep breaths into your belly, and then letting it all out, nice and slowly, doing it again in your own rhythm. Those 3 slow breaths. Just letting all of what's happened before this and what's going to happen after this go, and being here in the moment. We are sensitive beings, and we have this capacity to unlearn that anxiety or those ramped up feelings, and be able to come to a different awareness. So speaking of different awareness, we were last Tuesday, 2 days ago, we talked about dualism, that concept of black and white thinking, and what happens when we can free ourselves from the black and white thinking. So I ask you this, what is half of 8? Anybody want to just say the answer? 4. Anybody think of a different answer? Oh, EIG, right? If you're spelling it out, then that leaves EIG and HT. You can think of it that way. Half of 8, generally, 4, yes. How is it that it could be 0? It's if we split it top and bottom, so half of 8, yeah? What is half of 8? I love that. Way to think outside the box. That's exciting. We could also look at it, we can split it this way, and then it could be 3 or it could be E, right? And then we could split this way, we could get a W and an M, right? And then not to belabor the point, but we could look at the Roman numerals and then you get, 6 and 2 as half. So or you could look at it this way, half of 8, and then you get leftovers. So I love the idea that you just mentioned something outside of the box, the EIG, thinking of things in a different light, thinking of ways to be just things that we didn't consider before. So there's lots of possibility in this. And what happens when we sort of stretch our own boundaries? What happens when we can go above that dualistic thinking? It means that we become inherently powerful and we get to express our humanness in the frame of curiosity, which is really exciting. And it leads to some level of freedom. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So this capacity to unlearn gives us personal freedom and connection and creativity and curiosity and power and zest for life. It might spark that curiosity and potentially the creativity that got squelched earlier in your lives for some sort of reason. So the way that we're going to play with these concepts, and when I say play, it's because play is a very independent thing, right? The way that I play with these concepts is based on experiences I've had earlier in my life. They're based on what's happening in my life right now. It's based on the neural synapses that have been shaped over the course of the time that I have been on this planet and all the things I've been exposed to. And so yours is different. The idea that we all share this tool of the brain and how it puts ideas together, and yet the way that we do that is different and individual for every single person, is one of my favorite things about being alive, is meeting people with different ways of putting ideas together than what I've got. And inherently right now, 350 whatever people in this room with different ways of putting ideas and playing with those ideas inside. So often in this class, you will hear the TAs and I use the word story. And so I want to help you understand what we mean when we say, what's your story around that? We often think of stories as what maybe our parents or our elementary school librarians read to us, our teachers read to us, stories, except that we all carry stories because of all of that stuff I just said. We all carry our own story and the way pieces have been put together. So story in BiSci 3 is a way of seeing that becomes a belief and therefore can be your truth. Yeah, I love that you're jotting this down. Sweet. Story. A way of seeing that becomes a belief and then translates to becoming our truth, my truth. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to have you pair up with your neighbor and sort of talk this through a little bit, like digest it a little bit together before we move on. Okay, so my middle son, Henry, is quite pragmatic. He has one idea of what's right and what's wrong. He's very much a dualistic thinker at his grand old age of 13. And he'll say things like, Luke, who is his little brother, Luke made me angry. And I'll say, well, there's no way that Luke can make you angry. He can't make you anything. You are choosing that way forward. So whatever Luke did that feels irritating to you, you're taking it in and you're getting angry about it. That's your story. Okay? But it's his story. It's his belief that it's Luke's fault that he's angry, right? That I'm angry, Mom, because Luke made me this way. Like, actually, that can't possibly be. Luke is powerful, but not that powerful. You're giving him, a lot of power inside of you. So how about this one? I don't have time for breakfast. I hear quite a lot of students say that. I don't have time for breakfast. And some days I don't have time for breakfast, but that's a choice, right? I could have gotten up 20 minutes earlier, made my favorite yogurt bowl, and gone out the door, right? It was a choice. I did have time for breakfast. We've all had the same number of hours in the day, except that the story that some of us carry is like, man, I just don't have time for that. Except you do, right? So the story, the belief, right? So how about this one? I can't go out tonight. I have to do my homework. No, you don't have to do your homework. You're choosing to do your homework. So the power in that is I'm choosing to stay in to do my homework because I'm here at the university for an opportunity of learning. I am choosing to spend time doing my homework because I think it's valuable and I value my grade and I look forward to getting this, career, this job, whatever it is that you're actually here for. So I'm choosing to stay in to do my homework. Nobody says you have to do your homework. So do you get what I mean by stories? Those things that we carry, that we make truth in our heads, but aren't really truths? So now take a moment and talk to your neighbor about that and see what comes up. Process this a little bit with them. Go. Oh, no. Will you ding the bell? Does any pair have any thoughts that you'd like to share at this point? Any other examples? Yeah, great. Microphone's coming behind you. Thank you.
So we were kind of talking about Luke in the story,
Mm-hmm.
and we were thinking that like even if he might not want to feel anger, like it's not good for him, it's still good to like show your true emotion.
Heck yeah. Yeah, very much so. So yes, he's absolutely something that's really important in my house is the expression of emotion. But there's some power that you have around that. So we'll be talking about that lots more in class.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Yeah. It's going to come up particularly next Tuesday, which is really fun that you mentioned that. Thank you. What else? Anything else come up that you want to share? Thoughts? Coming.
Thank you. I was a little confused at first, like what was on the board, story, way of saying, believe, truth. I was confused. And then after talking with my partner, I was like, oh, your story is like your perspective on how you see things, and how you see things is what you believe, and what you believe is your truth. Your story is your truth, and it can be affected by your perspective and like the way that you, and then I was like, everything clicked, and I was like, oh, oh.
Thank you for laying that out in those words. That might be helpful to others. I appreciate that. Thank you. Sweet. Yeah.
Okay.
We said like there's a power in choosing, like you choose, like make choices every day, but there's also like an unconscious power of choosing. Like we make choices every single day without thinking of them. Like I'm going to class, like not that I have to, but I'm choosing to, like how I get to class. Like I can choose different ways. So I feel like it's an unconscious way of like choosing things, which is also powerful.
Woo! Yep. That is very much what Tuesday's class. It's all about choice, and it's one of my favorites. So that's pretty exciting. I love that you all are getting there. It's fun. Okay, so what about those bigger stories in our lives, the ones that turn into like deep-seated beliefs? So I'm going to go back in history a while, again, you know, relating to science, and yet also understanding some history is really valuable. So thinking about this is way back when, right? Earlier, people had this relationship of wonder with their universe, especially with the phenomena that they could not figure out how to explain, how they could rationally understand. So to solve these mysteries, they created this vast pantheon of gods and goddesses that explained everything that was beyond their understanding. Thunder and tides and earthquakes, volcanoes, infertility, plagues. So the ebb and flow of the ocean attributed to Poseidon, right? That was a deep-seated belief. If the ocean was doing crazy things, it was because Poseidon was upset. It feels a little bit strange to think of it that way now, but think of not being able to explain what was happening, right? Full moon tides are much stronger. But if for these people, that lack of the scientific understanding, they fill the gap with something else. So here it is, Poseidon. Volcanoes, well, here's this one. The seasonal change to winter caused by the planet's sadness that Persephone's annual abduction into the underworld explained the changing of the seasons. Volcanoes were the home of Vulcan, blacksmith to the gods who worked in a giant forge beneath the mountain, causing flames to spew out of the chimney. Right? Even the things that they couldn't explain inside their own beings. Love is the result of being targeted by Eros, and epidemics were explained as punishment sent by Apollo. So when these ancient people experienced gaps in their understanding of the world around them, they filled them, those gaps, with stories, beliefs that they could understand and hold on to. So countless stories filled these countless gaps, explaining things in the natural world that they were seeing, as well as what they were feeling. And so as scientific knowledge increased, the understanding of what's happening inside volcanoes, right, then Vulcan goes away. And yet, you know, there are those people that don't believe the science and hold on to Vulcan as a possibility. And yet, there's probably not anybody right now alive that understands that Vulcan is to blame for the volcanic eruptions. So slowly, those stories went away, and probably that took a long time, and it took a lot of work. Those people that came to understand the volcanoes first and then spread the news about that science. It's interesting to think about how those beliefs and stories evolved. So those beliefs that are deeply etched on us from a very early age, from those that we love and trust most, make a big make a big part of our lives, right? Therefore, any shifts in those beliefs tend to require a lot of work and a lot of reflection and sometimes discomfort when we're shifting our story. So I'm going to share with you now a story of the Potawatomi tribe, the story of Sky Woman falling onto Turtle Island. In the beginning, there was the sky world, and a woman that inhabited that world slipped and fell into, or rather through, a hole. There she is, falling. She fell like a maple seed pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe in hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hands. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below, but in that emptiness, there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. There they saw the small object, a mere dust mote. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, her arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled toward them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm, soft embrace of the feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold on to the woman above the water for very long, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she watched them gather the loons, the otters, the swans, the beavers, the fish of all kinds, and a great turtle rested in their midst and offered his back for her to stand upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while, he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help: otter, beaver, sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest swimmers. They returned, gasping for air with their heads ringing, and some did not return at all. Soon, only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative, and eventually a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human, but then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the turtle shell. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from the dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole world was made, not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all of the animals' gifts coupled with her deep gratitude. Together, they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, remember that Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand. As she toppled from the hole in Sky World, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were the branches, fruits and seeds, and all kinds of plants and medicines. These she scattered onto the new ground and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals too had plenty to eat, Many came to live with her on Turtle Island. So this is an origin story, how the Potawatomi explained the beginning of Earth. This is shared by botanist and citizen. She is the citizen of the Potawatomi tribe, Robin Wall Kimmerer. She shares that story in this book, Braiding Sweetgrass. So she is a botanist, so she's trained to ask questions of nature with the tools of science, and she is a native person who embraces the notion that plants and animals are our teachers. Children that hear Sky Woman Falling are knowing in their bones from birth the story and understanding the responsibility that flows between them and our earth. So I use that as an example because I imagine that many of you have also grown up with some sort of story telling of the beginning of Earth. It may have been this story. God created the heavens and the earth, the creation story of Christianity and Judaism, a story that's been said to be divinely inspired. And stories give us meaning. If this is your story, or if you have a different origin story, consider for just a moment how that story has shaped you and your beliefs, and how your beliefs have shaped your views and actions. Stories that come with, a very long tradition in our families sometimes. I looked up creation myth, as myth is another word for story, on Wikipedia. Creation myths have been around since ancient history and have served important societal roles. Over 100 distinct creation myths have been discovered. All creation myths are, in one sense, about cause and origin because they attempt to explain how the world formed and where humanity came from. Myths attempt to explain the unknown and sometimes teach a lesson. So how has the story that you've learned about the beginning, about your beginning, shaped and shifted you over time? However you choose about that belief, about the stories that are deep inside of you, belief is always a choice. This is Joan Chittister. She happens to be a Benedictine nun. She's a native Pennsylvanian. She did her PhD at Penn State. She's been the co-chair for the Global Peace Initiative for Women. The story goes that as she was making the choice at age 16 to become a nun, age 16, she was listening to a speaker about Christianity, and she asked the question, how do you know that God exists? How do you prove it? And the answer comes back, you can't prove that it is true, but you can't prove that it's not true. Belief in all of these stories that we carry, belief is a choice. So there's also this, then, the universe story, right? The universe we see is only the vast tip of the cosmic iceberg. Hundreds of billions of galaxies contained in our universe, each of them home to billions of stars and planets and moons and all the visible light and other energies, radio waves and gamma rays and X-rays. Everything we've seen with our telescope amounts to about 5% of all of the mass and the energy in this universe. So along with this normal matter, there's also dark matter, which can't be seen, but can be observed by its gravitational pulls. So all of that is energy, right? 68% of the total energy is dark energy, a force that's pushing the universe outward and causing it to expand faster and faster. A tug of war with the dark matter that's pulling things together, and then the dark energy, which is pushing things outward. And they say that the Big Bang is one of the most popular theories, but it's not the only one. More clues are continually being found about the origins of our planet, which then tell us more about the origin of our universe. What they do know is that it happened over 14 billion years ago. Background radiation from that original blast exists, still detectable, that gives scientists clues. During that first 400,000 years that our planet, that universe, I should even say the universe, it was before our planet, 400,000 years, dense, hot, opaque plasma, particle soup of matter and energy forming together, and then tiny disturbances called quantum fluctuations in that plasma set off these sound waves like ripples of a pebble dropped into a still pond. And that is what helped the matter to clump together and form the universe's initial structure. The result of the cooling and the clumping is that the photons could escape. And that's what photons, that is the light. So science is about being curious and continuing to ask questions and explore ideas. So that idea that pretty close to the beginning of all of that, there was the light. That happens in many cultural, religious stories, as well as from the science story. So sometimes religion and science are at odds, but does it have to be, right? Going back to dualism, do you have to hold those things separately? Or is it a case of both and? Can you hold more than one thing at once? Do you want to? Do you choose to? Does it benefit you to be open to possibilities? So then how did Earth come to be here? Came out of this supernova, right? A star is a huge ball of hydrogen gas compressed by gravity, fusing hydrogen atoms into helium, which creates an enormous amount of heat and light, a fusion reactor. And then when those stars are ending, when the hydrogen fuel is all used up, a marvelous sequence of cosmic alchemy begins, right? Stars have this finite life. When that hydrogen is gone, some die out with a whimper and some with a bang. Heavy elements are formed and released at that time. The gas clouds then condense, right? That forms gravity and allows solar systems to exist. So without these explosions, the basic stuff of planets, and therefore life, would not exist. 10 billion years after an explosion like this is when Earth came into being. Our sun is one of those stars, and at some point it too will run out of hydrogen and explode. And then all of the bits and pieces that get exploded start to join together. Bonding is at the heart of the cosmos. So from that Big Bang, this timeline moving forward of how the first, a few minutes later, first nuclei form, and then hundreds of thousand years, and then a few 100 million years, and then a few billion years, and then 9 billion, we get these planets forming. 10 billion is when life on Earth begins, and then we move to this 13.7 billion is present day, and then 20 billion is when our sun will explode. So the idea that things are connecting, right? Things are bonding. Bonding is at the heart of the cosmos. But that means that the stuff that's out there is part of us, right? All of the hydrogen that was formed in that Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, all of that happened. Hydrogen was only created then. So what is water? H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. All of that stuff was only formed 13.7 billion years ago, not since that time. So when we think of our bodies, and some of you wrote about this, the Big Bang is in you, right? If we are around 70 to 75% water, that water in you, like your age might be 20 or 50 or whatever, but the stuff of you is 13.7 billion years old. You are connected, right? You are part of all of this. So if you'll just show this quick video, please, Abby.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe? The most astounding fact. The most astounding fact is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucible that cooked life elements into heaviness, therefore, under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars.
Neil deGrasse Tyson just says it pretty effectively. So how did you come to be here? This is a big story, right? You are stardust. The universe is not a thing out there that we look out into the night sky and appreciate, but it's here. I am Jen. I am the universe in my way of being. I'm unique in such a beautiful way. And the cool thing is that all of you are too, right? We are together in our unique compilation of universe bits, which is pretty exciting, right? At least I find it pretty exciting. So take a moment and digest this with your partner. Think about it, talk it through. How does that make you feel? What comes up for you? Go. Anybody have anything they'd like to share?
I think one of the main things we do, just as people in general, is we, in order to make sense of everything, in order to fill in the gaps of our knowledge throughout human history, we often compare it to things that we can understand and create narratives, which is why I think a lot of deities and gods throughout history are all very similar to each other because it's all trying to fill in the gaps of what we can't really explain. But as time goes on, we understand more. We still probably won't ever be able to fully express that. There will always be some form of narrative there that we have to understand. Even our theory of, the Big Bang and all that, that's still kind of a narrative. It's literally called the Big Bang. So it's just us trying to create one big narrative.
Yep. And then more and more details will come that we'll need to shift our stories. Yeah. Thank you.
I personally believe that, well, regardless of what you believe too, like I believe that like God put us all on this earth and like he like looked at every single person in this room and was like, the world needs you. And like
Mhm.
regardless of what you believe, like something bigger than you thought that like the world needs you. And I think that that's so beautiful. Like again, regardless of you believe, like everyone needs to realize how like important that is. And I just think that's so cool that like everyone here is so different, but the world needed every single person. I don't know. I think that's cool.
Thanks for sharing your part of the story. Yeah. So it's just something to consider. Take hydrogen gas, leave it alone for 14 billion years, and it becomes rose bushes, giraffes, and Mozart symphonies. The stories are constantly shifting. What you choose to believe about your origin may profoundly affect your understanding of who you are and why you are here. If this resonates with you, or if you want to consider it for later, you might want to write it down. So those students, those children, those folks that grew up with Sky Woman falling as their story, I can't help but wonder how different our society might be today if we were all raised with an origin story that hinges on gratitude and collaboration and interdependence. If we all knew as a deep belief in our core that there is a responsibility, right, that flows between humans and Earth, what would that existence be like in that part of the story? And maybe that is part of your story, that there is that sense of responsibility, even if you grew up in a different tradition, a different story, different way of belief. So what I do want to share with you is this final video, the idea, and this will be like last week we did the sidewalk experiment where you go out and observe. The idea of shifting our way of questions, right? So take in this video and consider your sense of awe. Where do you find awe? So take in this video in your stillness before you start packing up, please. And we'll talk a minute in partners again afterward. So take this in.
Eminent psychologist Nicholas Ritter, the biological event awesome.
Can you turn up the volume?
Marvel at its own existence, the evolutionarily advantageous. In other words, it is biologically selected for because it forms our life in a sense of cosmic significance that makes us work harder to persist and to survive. In other words, awe has helped us survive. You know, a recent study out of Stanford on the subject of awe, and it validates this idea. They have found that regular incidences of awe leave residual benefits upon the individual that persist, such as increased feelings of empathy and compassion towards others, increased feelings of altruism, increased feelings of general well-being. In this study, they defined awe as an experience of such perceptual expansion, such perceptual vastness, that you literally have to reconfigure, upgrade your mental schematic just to accommodate, just to take in the scale of the experience. This is amazing. We've all felt this before. First time we stared upon the Grand Canyon, succumbed to the immersive power of an IMAX film. But perhaps the most exquisite account of the experience of awe was articulated by the brilliant Ross Anderson writing about the Hubble Space Telescope. Pay attention. He says that the Hubble has given us nothing less than an ontological awakening, a forceful reckoning what is, allowing us to contemplate space and time on a scale just shy of infinite. Why? He says gazing upon the famous deep field photograph literally allows us to mainline the whole of time through the optic nerve. To fit something so impossibly large into something so impossibly small. It's incredible. He says through the sheer aesthetic force of its discoveries, the Hubble distills the impossibly complex abstractions of astrophysics to these singular expressions of color and light, vindicating Keith's famous couple. Beauty is truth. Truth. Beauty.
So it's good for us, right, to experience these moments of awe. So take a moment and talk to your neighbor about a moment that you felt that deep strike of just amazing belief, amazing view of something. Moment of awe. So I would love to hear a couple of these moments of awe that will set us off into the rest of our day, into your labs tomorrow. Moments of awe.
It was May 6th, 2025, when Scott McTominay scored a bicycle kick to win Napoli Scudetto. Was the last time I felt that much awe.
So people are awesome. People, the variety of different skills and abilities blows my mind. I love it. Yes.
Thank you. My major is BFA acting, and so anytime I see someone that performs a monologue or anything with such intensity and such passion, it just leaves me in awe. Like, I am incredibly inspired. And it doesn't have to be acting, art in general. Like, I feel like our society wouldn't be where it is without art, music, and paintings and everything. It just leaves me in such awe that we created this.
Love that. Thank you.
I very much agree with that. Today, I had something from my major, which is music, where we just gather everybody who is in the voice area and a few people perform. And that whole performance, I was just like sitting there like, whoa, I go to school with these people. And that's like part of the reason that I chose this school, because everybody is just so like, I feel like watching these things, I'm like, wow, they're so much better than me. But I feel like surrounding myself with people who I think are better than me or who I watch and am in awe of makes me motivated to get better at what I'm doing.
Love it. Can you pass it straight back for me? Thank you.
The last time I was really in awe was when I was stargazing with like 9 of my closest friends right before we all went off to college. And I just felt really connected to them, and like connected to the universe as well.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely, lovely experiences. And I hope that you have the chance to have some awe over the next few days. I will see you Tuesday. Have wonderful time with your labs.